The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the expanse of the midnight blue sky. A lone farmhouse stood proudly amid the sprawling fields, weathered boards creaking softly in the evening breeze. Inside, a farmer named Jack sat by the window, fingers brushing against the polished wood of a rifle resting on his lap. He could feel the weight of a brewing storm, both in the skies and in the very air around him. There was always a tension in the air when dusk rolled in. A secret felt like it was just waiting to unleash itself, and tonight, Jack sensed it was no ordinary night. His instincts prickled. For weeks now, rumors had swirled through the local town about a brazen gang of bandits whose eyes were set on his land. These weren't just thieves. They were men who could tear through a home as if it were made of paper and burn everything to the ground without a second thought. Jack's mind raced as he recalled the stories, robberies that had left families in disarray, chests emptied of their last coins, dreams snuffed out in one swift motion. He'd heard how these men laughed as they tore the heart out of entire families, joyfully throwing their lives away like discarded curtains. But Jack wasn't just any farmer. He was a man forged from the very grit of the earth he tilled. As night fell like a curtain, the world outside grew silent, save for the rustle of leaves and the soft chirp of crickets. Jack stood, moving quietly to the back door. The moonlight spilled across the yard, illuminating his weathered face, etched with years of hard work, laughter, and pain. Tonight he would not be the victim of circumstances. Tonight he would take a stand. He took a deep breath, inhaling the earthy scent of tilled soil and dried hay. Each breath filled him with a determination he could almost taste. The shadows outside danced as he stepped into the cool night. He caught sight of a sorrel horse image glimmering in the moonlight, a bandit steed. The clatter of hooves sent a chill down his spine, but he did not waver. Jack melted into the shadows, heart pounding, eyes sharp. Not far off, the sound of voices erupted. The bandits were near. Jack leaned low, pressing against the cold wooden fence that separated his land from the encroaching dark. He heard them before he saw them, brash, powerful, filled with a reckless kind of laughter. These men thought they were invincible. They clearly didn't know the kind of trouble they were riding into. As the gang approached, each step echoing their boldness, Jack focused on their movements. They dismounted with clattering boots, eyes roving over the farmhouse, searching for signs of life, searching for weakness. Jack felt the lump in his throat rise, a wave of anger surging through him. He clutched the rifle tighter, fingers curling around the cool metal. One of the bandits drawled, scanning the house. "Ain't no one home, right? Let's grab what we can." A wicked grin spread across his face and Jack's pulse quickened. These men were too confident, too relaxed. He watched as they formed a circle, laughing like vultures overhead, waiting for a feast. If only they knew they were about to encounter a storm they couldn't imagine. Jack inhaled slow and steady, placing his heart in the rhythm of the moment. He remembered his father's words, "Every man has a breaking point, son." He was ready. He set his sights on the closest bandit, a powerful figure, broad-shouldered with a scoundrel's smile. Just one shot, that was all it would take. The bandit leaned back, arms crossed, mocking the stillness of the night. "Come on out, farmer, we mean you no harm." His voice dripped with arrogance. But the growing quiet, the gentle rustle of leaves, bore witness to Jack's resolve. He steadied his breath and slipped into stillness, allowing the wind to carry his heart's rhythm. With that single breath, he released the tension in his shoulders like a hunter readying for the perfect shot. Another bandit called out, frustration tinging his tone as he peered through the window. Jack could see the flickering shadows of their impatience. They weren't just thieves, they were predators, and he was their prey. But he thrived in this kind of moment. His blood quickened as he marked the cadence of their movements. He wanted them to feel that weight, to become uncertain, to ask whether they truly wanted to follow through. With that thought, he planned his move. A sound, crickets, and then soft footsteps across the ground behind one of the bandits. Perhaps it was the wind. Perhaps it was too late. Jack knew he had to act and act fast. In an instant, Jack struck like a hawk descending on its prey, emerging from the shadows to square his stance. He shouted, a deep bark that resonated with the rawness of the earth itself. Eyes widened, bandits spun around, their faces morphing from arrogance to shock. The air crackled with a sudden tension as Jack leveled his rifle at the first man who had spoken, who now stared back with wide eyes. The other bandits, realization dawning, reached for their weapons. Jack didn't hesitate. With the precision of a man who had fought for everything he owned, he squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing through the night. One bandit dropped, a look of disbelief frozen on his face. Silence fell, sharp as glass. Panic erupted among the remaining men. They fumbled for their weapons, scrambling to regroup. But the shadows were now Jack's allies. He stepped back into the depths of darkness, moving like a ghost as panic surged in their ranks. One yelled, managing to draw his gun, but by then the element of surprise had been stripped from them. Jack's movements were fluid, his purpose resolved. He silently maneuvered, taking advantage of the illumination cast by the moon, the very light that revealed their weaknesses. A bandit hissed into the night, voice trembling ever so slightly. "Right here," Jack shot back, emerging from the shadows like a phantom. He took aim again, sending another round into the air. They were clumsy, bouncing off the instinctive fear that had seized them, while each bullet from Jack's rifle found its mark. One by one, as the last echoes of thunder rolled far off in the distance, Jack watched as panic consumed the gang. Fear painted their faces while adrenaline coursed through their veins. With every shot, Jack's heart pounded just as fiercely. One yelled as they scrambled to mount their horses, but Jack wasn't done yet. He had one last thing to say. Never forget that there's strength in the shadows, strength in the land. He fired one last shot across their path, striking the ground just before their horses' hooves, sending them screeching away. The bandits fled into the night, voices blending with the wind, their laughter transformed into terrified screams. The echoes of their chaos lingered in the air long after they disappeared into the enveloping darkness. Jack lowered his rifle, breathless, feeling a wave of emotion wash over him. The tensions of the last hour began to dissipate. He stood still, fists clenched, heart surging with triumph. He had protected his home, and he had reclaimed his life from the grasp of darkness. The moon shone brighter now, reflecting off the fields that stretched endlessly around him. The air was cool, but Jack felt warmth radiating through his chest. He took a moment to breathe deeply, absorbing the silence that enveloped him. The farmhouse stood sturdy behind him, a fortress that bore witness to the relentless struggle between light and darkness. For the rest of the night, he remained vigilant, a sentinel against the potential return of danger. But deep inside, Jack understood this wasn't just about defending his land. It was a declaration, a claim of its worth not just to survive, but to thrive. To show that even in the darkest times, bravery could rise from within, as surely as day follows night. As dawn broke, casting golden rays across the fields, Jack turned to survey what remained. The earth was silent now, but it would recover, heal, and grow again, just as he would. And the shadows, even those that danced like fleeting whispers, would forever remind him of the strength he found waiting within. In the life of a farmer, darkness might come, but it would never hold sway over the heart of a man who stood firm. A sudden crack of gunfire shattered the stillness of the night, sending a jolt through the hearts of all who heard it. But on this remote ranch, tucked away beneath mountains that loomed like silent sentinels, the sound was only the beginning. Jack Hargrove, a farmer who had spent a lifetime nurturing this land, lay in the shadows, heart racing but calm, waiting. He had known the danger was coming, like a storm rolling in, heavy with ominous clouds. Weeks of whispers had reached him. Bandits were on the prowl, targets chosen with the precision of a blade. Jack's brothers had lost their farm to these thieves, and the tales told in town turned whispers into shouts of warning. They stole not only money but peace and dreams, leaving behind chaos. Jack knew his fight wasn't just for his crops, it was a battle for dignity, for survival. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the world transformed. Shadows stretched across the fields, merging with the night like thick, inky smoke. Jack moved quietly toward the barn where he had prepared for a confrontation he didn't want but knew was inevitable. He gripped the old rifle, the wood warm in his hands, an extension of his will. It had seen better days but felt right, its weight grounding him. The moon hung high, a watchful eye illuminating the scene unfolding beyond his land. Through the wooden slats of the barn, Jack glimpsed the first of them, three figures on horseback, silhouetted against the pale light. They rode with a swagger as if the land belonged to them. Laughter echoed, a cruel, mocking sound that sent a shiver down his spine. Jack's heart drummed a steady beat, a rhythm that spoke of resolve. He had always believed in the strength of his roots, the soil that flowed through his veins. This land had fed him, shaped him, and the thought of losing it to marauding thieves ignited a fire in his gut. He remembered his father's teachings. A man always stands his ground when the storm comes. The bandits dismounted, boots hitting the ground with heavy thuds, voices filled with bravado. One stepped closer to the farmhouse, examining the scene like a wolf scenting its prey. "Look at this place," he shouted, and the others cackled, confidence radiating off them in waves. Jack clenched his jaw, his thoughts racing. They were underestimating him. They thought he was just a farmer, a simple man lost among the fields. Little did they know that he had spent years working these lands, knowing every inch like the lines on his own hands. He understood the terrain, the lay of the land. He could make each of their steps feel like a stumble. With measured breaths, he settled into the shadows, moving like smoke through the barn. Time slowed, adrenaline coursing through his veins like wildfire. The moonlight flickered across the rifle barrel, and Jack's blue eyes locked onto the nearest bandit. He focused on the creases etched deep into the man's face. This bandit wasn't just a thief. He was a nightmare incarnate. They weren't just coming for money. They were coming for everything Jack held dear. Another bandit yelled, his impatience thinly veiled. Jack listened to their careless banter, growing more furious with each passing moment. These men had no idea the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. Jack exhaled slowly, aligning himself with that feeling of righteous anger. He shouted, the sound echoing out into the night, slicing through their laughter like a hot knife. The bandits froze, confusion washing over their faces, turning to each other as if trying to discern the threat. Jack stepped out, revealing himself from the shadows, standing tall like an oak against the sky. The moonlight haloed around him, casting a powerful figure who would not be easily taken down. With a swift movement, he raised the rifle. "I've waited for you." An astonished silence fell. Then, as if his words had ignited a fire, the bandits pulled their guns, their bravado crumbling like dry leaves. Jack did not hesitate. He fired, the bullet slicing through the air, striking true. One bandit fell, a look of astonishment forever frozen in his eyes, the bravado evaporating in an instant. Panic surged among the others. They stumbled back, shock turning into fear as their friend collapsed into the dust. Jack's heart thundered in his chest, the adrenaline propelling him forward. He roared, fury resonating with a valor that harkened back to generations before him. With a second shot, he reminded them of the weight of his resolve. Fear turned their laughter to shouts of terror. Jack could hear their thoughts twisted with panic, running through the fear of what lay before them, that this was not a mere farmer but a man who had fought back. One shouted, trying to mount his horse, but Jack grabbed the moment like a lifeline. He had them on the edge, the fear palpable in the air like charged electricity. They were not merely thieves but broken spirits quickly realizing the error of their choices. In that moment of chaos, the familiar tug of desperation gripped the bandits and urged them to scatter. Their plans turned to dust as they collided against each other, tumbling horse and man alike, leaving behind the weight of their own hubris. Jack pushed forward, knowing he had to take the fight to them. He raced across the barn's threshold, fueled by a fierce determination, ready to defend his homestead with all he had. One barked, drawing his weapon, but Jack was quicker. He aimed, steadying his breath, his focus sharp. Another bullet carved through the night, sending the second man crashing to the ground. Chaos erupted around him, the remaining bandit trying to furtively find a way out. Jack faced him down, realizing that bravery ebbed and flowed under pressure. This man was desperate, a cornered rat flailing under the weight of reality, knowing he'd come face to face with something fearsome. The bandit shouted, raising his hands, desperation twisted his voice. Jack paused, the tension hanging in the air. "You came to take my life," he replied, voice low and steady. In a heartbeat, the last bandit turned on his heels, mounting his horse with sheer panic splattering across his face. He fled into the darkness, the echoes of his retreat mingling with the night. Jack stood still, rifle gripped tight, still trained on the shadows where they had vanished. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind an exhaustion that felt both profound and liberating. The world around him was still, the moon holding its breath as if to witness the aftermath. He took a moment to breathe deep and steady, letting the night fill his lungs, reveling in the sweet taste of victory mixed with raw humanity. The wars we fight often shape us more than the outcome itself. Jack was living proof. One by one, he thought of the families who had lost everything to those monsters, the farmers who'd fought similar battles, only to yield to darker forces. Tonight, he had become a beacon reminding not just himself, but all who lived on these lands that bravery could thrive in the unlikeliest of places. As dawn approached, the first light kissed the earth, and Jack walked among his fields, surveying the quiet aftermath with a calm that felt like warmth wrapping around him. The shadows no longer scared him. Instead, they stood as sentinels of resilience, the strength drawn from the very soil he tilled. There would be more battles ahead, new challenges to face, but Jack knew now that he had the heart for it. As long as he stood for what was right, as long as he held the shadows close and fought with everything he had, he would prevail. With each step, he felt the pulse of the land beneath him, a connection deeper than mere ownership. This was home, and nothing could take that from him. Jack lingered in the morning light, allowing hope to blossom amid the remnants of the night. The darkness may linger, but so would he, waiting, ever ready for the next storm. The sun dipped low, casting a golden hue over the endless fields, but for Jack Hargrove, it felt like a final warning. He leaned against the wooden railing of his porch, calloused hands gripping the splintered edges. The peace he had fought for was fragile, and in these quiet moments, he could feel the storm brewing in the distance. Rumors had fluttered like crows in the wind across the small town. Bandits were on the move, preying on unsuspecting farmers, tearing apart lives with the force of a brutal summer storm. The stories settled in his gut like stones, heavy and unsettling. Just last week, Old Man Thompson had lost half his herd when a gang raided his barn under the cloak of night. Jack was a man of the land, but he was also a man of shadows, knowing how to navigate both light and dark. He could sense trouble before it arrived, as if the air itself warned him. Tonight he felt it, the palpable electric tension in the air, the rushing wind that whispered danger. He slipped inside the barn, pulling aside a piece of weathered tarpaulin to reveal his prize, a rifle worn but dependable, a friend forged in the heat of many battles. It had stood by him through the most trying times, and now it would be needed once again. Jack had no illusions about the danger ahead. The bandits would come, and they would come hard. As darkness wrapped around the ranch like a tight embrace, Jack settled into the shadows, his heart a steady drumbeat against the quiet of the night. He knew they would strike soon, emboldened by the cover of darkness. He could almost hear their laughter now, a cruel sound that cut through the night and wrapped around his thoughts like a vine. The first sounds of hoofbeats echoed from beyond the rise. They were slow at first, like the first drops of rain before a storm, but the rhythm quickened as they drew closer. 3 silhouettes emerged against the starlit sky, their horses snorting and stamping, eager to approach. Jack's heart raced, but he held steady, his body molded into the shadows like a soldier ready for battle. One of them boasted, a swagger that echoed foolish bravado. Easy pickings. Their laughter mixed with the chirping of crickets, a bizarre harmony of mirth and menace. Jack clenched his jaw, anger flaring inside him like a flame. They thought they were invincible. They thought they could just sweep in and take whatever they wanted without a second thought. But he was waiting, keeping the storm in his heart, ready to unleash it. "Let's make this quick. I ain't in the mood to play games," another bandit growled. Their greed rendered them unsuspecting. Jack's resolve was a blade, sharp and focused. This wasn't just about defending property. It was about standing against tyranny and injustice, of reclaiming what was rightfully his. The first bandit dismounted, swaggering toward the farmhouse with an arrogance that made Jack's blood boil. "Time to teach this farmer a lesson," he sneered, pushing open the creaky door with a reckless hand. In that moment, Jack stepped from his hiding place, rifle aimed steady and true, the cold metal cool against his palm. "You've made a grave mistake," he declared, voice clear and resolute enough to cut through the night air. The bandits froze, surprise washing over their faces like a sudden downpour. For a brief moment there was only silence, as if the world itself paused to witness what was about to unfold. Jack took a breath, steadying his aim, and watched as disbelief turned to panic. The lead bandit fumbled for his weapon, eyes wide, processing the reality of a man standing up to them. Jack pulled the trigger and the sound erupted like thunder in the stillness. The bandit dropped, his bravado extinguished in an instant, the life snuffed out just as easily as a blown-out candle. Someone shouted, but it was too late. Panic filled the night. The second man turned to escape, scrambling to grab his horse, but Jack was relentless. He squeezed off another shot, and that bandit fell too, the air filled with the stench of gunpowder and betrayal. Only the last one remained, terror etched across his face as he stumbled back, heart racing faster than his feet. Jack stood firm, rifle still raised, the weight of the weapon a comfort now. The bandit, trembling with fear, took one last desperate look at Jack, who stood resolute, the shadows hanging around him like a cloak. In that moment it was clear who had the power. The grip of desperation tightened around the bandit's throat, and he bolted, scrambling like a rat scampering away from a flood. The chaos subsided as quickly as it had erupted, the night reclaiming its stillness. Jack could hear nothing but the sound of his own breath, the weight of adrenaline slowly ebbing. He lowered his rifle, watching the retreating figure disappearing into the shadows, leaving behind the echoes of their unwarranted bravado. Jack stepped toward the fallen men, a mixture of victory and sorrow swirling in his heart. No one wanted this. No one wanted to see lives lost, families torn apart. But he understood that sometimes survival required hard decisions. They had chosen their path, and now they had to accept the consequences. "Never again," he whispered into the night, the words a promise as much to himself as to the land he protected. He turned back to the farmhouse, feeling both the weight of the night's events and an overwhelming sense of relief. It was over, at least for now. As dawn painted the sky in soft hues of orange and pink, Jack felt a new resolve blooming within him. He gathered his belongings, taking the time to clean his rifle, each stroke a reminder of the fight he had faced. The power of his decision lingered, a thrilling wake-up call to cherish what he had, to honor each moment and protect what was his. Standing on the porch with the rising sun warming his back, he took a deep breath, feeling the freedom beating in tune with his heart. The ranch was alive, the world awakening with life around him. He could almost hear the birds singing like ancient warriors heralding a new day. Yet, a deep understanding coursed through him, like a river overflowing its banks. The world could be dark, and danger was always lurking, whether in the shadows or out in the open. But for every shadow cast upon his path, he would be ready. The farmer had waited in the darkness, but he had emerged from it stronger, braver, and unyielding. With a determined heart, Jack ventured into the fields, ready to begin his day, confident that his fight was not just about survival. It was about the spirit of resilience, of standing up against the storms that threatened to sweep his home away. He knew that the shadows held no power over him. Rather, he became entwined with them, ready to confront whatever came next. In many ways, Jack's story echoed the tales of countless fighters throughout history, men and women rising up against the odds, standing defiant in the face of injustice. Their spirits could be found in the fields he tended, in the soil from which he had grown. Each moment, each struggle, stitched into the fabric of who he was. And so, with dawn breaking warmly over the landscape, the shadows of the night faded into memory, reminders that sometimes, in the darkest of times, a heart can ignite a flame and turn the tide of fate. Jack Hargrove was not just a farmer. He was a protector of his land, a warrior in the shadowed battleground of life, standing tall and proud, ready to face whatever storm awaited him on the horizon. The night was still, the kind of stillness that thickens the air, making you feel the world is holding its breath. But that calm was a warning, a whisper of danger lurking just beyond the edge of light. Out on the far edge of the ranch, Jack Hargrove squinted into the dark, sensing trouble brewing. He had spent years cultivating this land, his heart intertwined with the very soil he tilled. And now, he could feel that bond being threatened. The past few weeks had seen an unsettling rise in bandit activity. Stories echoed through the small town. Ranches looted, families torn apart, lives upended. Jack had heard the whispers in the crowded saloon, the tremors of fear in the voices of friends. They were real, these bandits, and they were coming closer. He knew they wouldn't hesitate to smash through his doors and take everything he had worked for. As twilight faded to black, he slid into the barn, a quiet sanctuary filled with the scent of hay and hard work. Dust motes danced in the last rays of light, filtering through the wooden slats. His gaze fell on the old rifle, its wood polished with age and experience. Jack's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the resolve that surged within him. He would not be a victim. The air was heavy and every sound seemed amplified. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, each noise raised the hairs on the back of his neck. He settled into the corners where the shadows thickened, his heart echoing in time with the deepening night. Minutes stretched into an hour, but Jack was patient. He had learned to embrace stillness, to wait for the right moment. And when that moment came, when the distant sound of horses pierced the veil of night, he was ready. The bandits were near, and their footsteps grew louder, closer, as if they were charging right through the thick of the dark. A trio of shadowy figures loomed on the horizon, moving in unison, the rhythm of their horses matching the malice in their intentions. Jack's grip tightened around the rifle. He had heard their laughter float on the wind before, loud, brash, taunting. This time it was different. There was an urgency in their movements, perhaps even a hint of desperation. One of them scoffed, dismounting with a swagger that reeked of reckless confidence. Easy pickings. The words hung in the air, thick and sour. Jack could feel the static in the atmosphere, a tension that could snap at any moment. He watched from his hidden refuge, the flicker of a lantern illuminating their malicious grins. They were predators sizing up their prey, unaware of the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. "Let's make this quick. I ain't in the mood for games," another shouted, his voice dripping with impatience. They were careless, cocky bandits riding high on a false sense of security. Jack had little time left. His heart raced, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of knowing he would have to act. This was no ordinary night. It was an invitation to reclaim his power. He took a deep breath, calming the storm inside him, focusing on the task at hand. Then, with the stillness of a predator, he stepped from the shadows. "You've made a grave mistake," he called out, the words escaping his lips like smoke from the barrel of his rifle. The bandits froze, surprise flickering across their faces like the flame of a half-failed torches. Jack's silhouette loomed against the glow of the lantern, solid and unyielding, casting a long shadow that seemed to stretch infinitely. One bandit spat, fumbling for his weapon, eyes wide in disbelief. "Someone who's not afraid to fight back," Jack declared, his voice a low growl filled with determination. He raised the rifle, aiming steady. Time slowed. Every moment felt electric as he squeezed the trigger. The blast erupted into the night like a thunderclap, and the first bandit pitched forward, disbelief etched into his face. Jack's heart thundered in his chest as he took aim again, moving fluidly, never losing focus. The other two bandits stumbled backward, stumbling to find their bearings, their bravado evaporating faster than the light of day. Shouted the second bandit as he scrambled to mount his horse. But Jack was a hawk, his eyes fixed on his target, the final bandit, scampering away from the chaos he had wrought. "Not so fast," Jack called, his voice a steady pulse in the night. He pulled the trigger once more. The sound reverberated through the air, and the last bandit's horse whinnied in panic, reins snapping as the rider disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind panic and disarray. Jack stood alone now, the silence pulsing around him, the cool air filled with the aftermath of power reclaimed. His heart raced, not from fear but from the rush of triumph. He had been the hunter tonight, standing tall against the darkness that threatened to engulf him. But as he surveyed the chaos left in the wake of the bandits' flight, a wave of somber reality washed over him. Lives had been taken here, lives lost in their greed. This wasn't just a battle won. It was a grim reminder of the risks that came with living in a world where danger always lurked. He holstered his rifle, the weight of it shifting from burden to protection. The ranch was his sanctuary, and tonight it had become a battleground. The moon hung high above, watching, silent witness to the violence and bravery that had unfolded. As dawn began to break, painting the sky in soft pastels, Jack stepped forward, moving among the remnants of the struggle. Each hoofprint in the dirt was a memory. Each blade of grass held the weight of the night's conflict. The land had spoken, and it would not be silenced. There was work to do. Jack gathered the remnants of the chaos, the broken bits of life left behind by the bandits and the makeshift markers left in the wake of the battle. He didn't want to forget, but he also didn't want to dwell. He had to move forward for himself and for the land that cradled him. But as he went about his duties, Jack felt a flicker of doubt, the nagging question of what if. The bandits would return, and next time there might be more of them, or they might be better prepared. The weight of his choices pressed down on him, not out of regret but out of an understanding that sometimes survival demanded more than one brave moment. Later that day, as the sun rose higher, Jack found solace in the rhythm of his chores. He moved with purpose, hearts racing, pulling weeds from the garden, the scent of earth filling his lungs. But beneath that calm exterior, something deeper churned within him. He thought back to the stories told around the fires, the tales of brave men standing against tyranny. That resonated within him, igniting a flame. Jack decided he would prepare, not just for himself, but for everyone who depended on the land. He would not let fear dictate his future. He would not be a victim, nor would he be the coward hiding behind closed doors. He would turn the ranch into a bastion of strength. Weeks passed, the sun rising and setting, each day granting him new resolve. Jack was not alone. He found supporters among the neighbors, farmers willing to band together against the growing threat. They shared their stories, each tale adding layers to Jack's convictions. "Together we can form a line of defense," he declared one evening as they gathered around a campfire under a starry sky. "We protect our own." Ideas flowed like the warmth of the fire. They made plans, forged agreements, and drew up strategies for the days ahead. With every passing moment, Jack felt the shadows recede, the threat they had posed now a challenge to be faced. This wasn't just a fight for territory. It was a fight for community, a bond that grew stronger with each shared meal, each laugh echoing under the stars. And then the day came when they would put their resolve to the test. Mounted on their horses, armed with rifles and ready for battle, they set out into the fields, prepared to confront the inevitable. There was a calmness about them, an understanding that what lay ahead was more than fear. It was a collective spirit, a force ready to rise. As dusk began to settle, the air shifted. Jack felt it, the tension crackling like static electricity, a long-buried instinct flaring to life. Their formation spread wide, vigilant, every eye scanning for movement beyond the horizon. Hours passed like seconds, the world quiet as they waited. Just as doubt began to creep in, a sound broke through, the distinct thudding of hooves meeting ground. Someone shouted, fingers gripping their weapons tightly, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Jack's heart raced as he saw them emerge, bandits on horseback, their shadows stretching long against the setting sun. They had returned, emboldened by their earlier cowardice. But this time they were met not by a fragile farmer but by a united front of determined souls. Jack commanded, voice steady. The bandits, sensing the change, hesitated. They were no longer just faces in the dark. They were now the predatory wolves confronted by fierce lions. And in that moment, Jack knew they had the advantage. The fear that had once ruled him transformed into fierce determination, and the courage he had fought hard to claim surged through their ranks. The battle erupted with a roar, hooves pounding, gunfire ringing through the air, echoes of resolve mingling with the land itself. They fought like they had everything to lose because they did. The engagement air crackled with heat and fury, but amid the chaos, Jack felt alive. The fight was no longer just about survival. It was about fighting for the future, for what lay beneath the soil, the bonds of community and shared laughter echoing through the fields. One by one, bandits faltered against the resolve of the farmers, realizing too late that they had underestimated the strength of a united heart. As the dust settled after the clash, the echoes of bravery resonated with every heartbeat, until at last, silence fell once more over the fields. They had won, not just a battle, but a new chapter in their lives. The sun descended, and Jack stood tall, surrounded by those who had faced the darkness with him, spirits brave and unyielding in the face of fear. As they gathered together, hands clasped, Jack realized that the shadows would always be there, lurking at the edges of their lives. But he also understood that they had the power to stand tall against whatever storm might come next. The ranch had become more than land. It had become a testament to resilience and community, a foundation built on strength and unity, a legacy forged from the heart. And as they turned toward the horizon, Jack felt a warmth spread within him, a promise of future challenges met with courage, ready to face whatever might lie ahead together. The night air was thick with tension, a silence so profound it felt like the world was holding its breath. Jack Hargrove could sense it before he saw it, the unmistakable feeling that trouble was looming just beyond the horizon of his ranch. He stepped outside into the cool darkness, feeling the weight of the silence pressing against him, as if the very land was waiting for something to unfold. It had been weeks since the rumors began to circulate in town, whispers of a gang of bandits moving north, targeting ranchers, stealing livestock, wreaking havoc in the dead of night. Jack had heard the tales in the saloon, the fear in the voices of his neighbors, the stories of dreams shattered and lives left in disarray. Those echoes stirred in him a deep-rooted sense of responsibility. This land wasn't just soil and crops, it was his home, the legacy of generations before him. He would protect it. He moved like a shadow across the porch, the wooden boards creaking softly underfoot. The moon hung high, casting a silver glow over the fields, illuminating the path ahead while keeping the edges of darkness thick and inviting. Jack had prepared for this moment. He had known it would come. He had been waiting. The sounds came quickly, the distant thundering of hooves growing louder, punctured only by the raucous laughter spilling from the mouths of the bandits. One called out, his voice dripping with arrogance as they rode closer. "Ain't nothing but an empty shell." Jack's jaw tightened as he crouched low, his heart pounding in rhythm with the galloping hooves. They thought themselves invincible, too blind to see the care he'd taken to fortify his home against such marauders. He could picture the scene vividly, the terror cloaked in bravado as they stormed through the gate, expecting to take what they wanted without resistance. But they didn't know Jack. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a guardian of this land, and he would fight back. He quietly made his way to the barn, the familiar scent of hay and old wood engulfing him as he stepped inside. There, nestled in the shadows, was his rifle, the same one his father had wielded in darker times. It felt heavy in his hands, reassuring yet full of responsibility. He checked the bullets, loading the rifle with a calm precision that matched the storm swirling in his heart. As the bandits approached, Jack crept back into the darkness, his body pressed against the cold wooden beams of the barn, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. He could hear them clearly now, their voices loud and mocking. One of them shouted, and Jack felt the heat of anger surge through him. He stayed silent, a wolf in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. The bandits dismounted just outside the barn, their laughter echoing as they rifled through farm tools and crates, treating his home like a buffet of opportunity. Jack could hardly breathe, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. "Where's the owner? He probably fled like a coward," one bandit jeered, kicking a barrel carelessly. Jack's grip tightened on the rifle. They were about to find out that the coward was the one standing right in front of them, laughing in the face of danger. Finally, the time came. The lead bandit, his swagger painted with arrogance, stepped too close to the barn entrance, and in that instant everything transformed. Jack breathed deep, centering his mind, letting the world around him fade into focus. Just one shot, that was all he needed. With a sudden, deliberate movement, he stepped into the light, rifle raised, eyes locked onto the bandit. "You should leave," Jack said, his voice steady, a thunderous command that erupted into the night. Shock washed over the faces of the bandits, their laughter fading. The fearless bravado evaporated as they realized the threat standing before them. The bandit stammered, fumbling for his weapon. Before they could react, Jack fired, the world bursting into sound. The bullet found its target and the first bandit dropped, eyes wide with disbelief. Pandemonium erupted. The remaining two bandits scrambled, surprise morphing into terror as they faced Jack, the farmer who had waited silently in the shadows. Jack shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. A second shot rang out, and one more bandit fell as the other frantically grabbed his horse, trying to escape. Jack was relentless. "You came here thinking you could take what's mine." His voice echoed in the stillness of the night, heavy with determination. The last bandit was scrambling now, fear etched across his face as he turned to run. But in that moment of chaos, Jack felt something awaken inside him, a roaring fire that burned brighter than anything he had ever known. He took aim, squeezing the trigger one more time. The ground shook with the sound of gunfire, and the bandit fell, crashing to the ground just as the first light of dawn began to touch the earth. Silence engulfed the ranch. Jack stood alone, rifle smoking gently in his hands, breath heavy but steady. The quiet was profound, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just enveloped him. Jack felt his heart thunder in his chest, the war within him raging between triumph and grief. He had defended his home, yes, but he had also taken lives, a choice that weighed heavily on his soul. He took a moment, allowing himself to breathe in the cool morning air. The sun began to rise, painting the sky with hues of gold and orange, pulling him out of the darkness. Jack moved slowly among the remnants of what had occurred, the lifeless bodies of the bandits marking a harsh reality that would forever etch itself into his memory. Only the faintest rustle of the wind disturbed the air, carrying the murmurs of nature awakening around him. As he surveyed the scene, it struck him how fragile life truly was. Bandits had come, expecting to take whatever they wanted, and in one moment everything had shifted. He knew this would not be the last time. The bandits might have retreated, but the threat was still there, waiting, lurking just beyond the horizon. Jack felt a new burden settle in, the weight of responsibility not just to himself, but to the land, to the community that depended on him. In the days that followed, Jack worked tirelessly. Each sunrise brought a renewed resolve. This land was worth fighting for. He gathered the other farmers, sharing his stories, his fight, igniting a flame of unity among them. They couldn't allow fear to tear them apart. Together, they were stronger. "If we stand together, we can protect what's ours," he urged them, and his words sparked a fire in their hearts. They invested in their future-reinforcing barns, setting up lookout points. They trained together, creating a bond that grew deeper with each passing day. Jack led the charge, his experience no longer born of fear, but of proactive hope, a promise to defend against the darkness that threatened to invade their lives. But one fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon once more, that darkness returned. A distant rumbling reached Jack's ears, and he felt that familiar prickle of tension. He climbed to the top of a small ridge overlooking the fields, eyes scanning the distance. Sure enough, shadows were moving against the twilight sky horsemen, their forms outlined against the fading light. "They're back," he whispered to himself, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The bandits, emboldened by their previous failure, were charging toward the ranch, ready to pick up where they had left off. But this time, Jack was ready. He had prepared for this moment. He had allies, friends he had trained to stand strong, and hearts that beat for the same cause. He quickly signaled to the others, their determined expressions mirroring his own. As the gang approached, a sense of ferocity ignited among them. This was no longer just a fight for land. It was a fight for every family that cherished their home, every farmer who had risen at dawn to work the fields. Jack commanded, a newfound authority rising in his chest. They took their places, a line forming before the onslaught, each person steadfast and ready, breath steady as they prepared to defend their sanctuary. Jack yelled as the bandits closed in, the world erupting in a storm of hooves and shouts. The battle was chaotic gunfire mingling with cries of defiance. They fought like wildflowers breaking through concrete. This land was theirs. Jack felt the adrenaline rush through him, his rifle finding a rhythm as he aimed and fired, each shot echoing like the beat of a war drum. The bandits were thrown into disarray, their earlier confidence splintering like the wood of the barn they sought to destroy. With every passing moment, Jack's heart swelled with pride. He was no longer just a farmer hiding in the shadows. He was a warrior standing on the front lines, protecting his home, his friends, his community. The men and women beside him fought not just for themselves, but for something bigger, a legacy they refused to let slip away. As the last bandit began to retreat, fear replacing the arrogance that once filled his eyes, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of triumph wash over him. They had defended their land, pushing back against the shadows that sought to engulf them. As the dust began to settle and the quiet returned, Jack surveyed the battlefield, catching his breath among the broken remnants. He turned to look at his friends, their faces smeared with sweat, dirt, and a fierce determination. They were survivors, bond forged in the heat of battle. "We did it," he breathed, the weight of it all settling comfortably in his heart. But it wasn't just survival. They had created a spirit of resilience in their community, a determination that would ripple outwards like waves on a pond. They had claimed more than their land. They had claimed their dignity, their identity, and forged an unbreakable bond. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in one last burst of color, Jack raised his rifle in salute, not just to his friends who stood alongside him, but to the land itself. He had stood in the shadows, waiting for his moment, and when it came, he had not faltered. The echoes of the night reminded him that battles would always surface, but they would face them together. The shadows might loom, threatening to encroach upon their lives, but in each other they had found strength. Jack was no longer just a farmer. He was a beacon of hope, heart beating boldly against the darkness, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a ghostly glow over the sprawling fields of the Hargrove Ranch. Jack Hargrove stood at the edge of his property, heart racing as he peered into the darkness. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones. The air was thick and pregnant with tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. All around him, shadows flickered, but it was always the quiet moments that sent a shiver down his spine. Weeks had passed filled with stories of bandits sweeping through the countryside, robbing ranchers blind, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Jack had seen the damage firsthand. Friends had lost their livestock, their crops, their very way of life. Each tale whispered in the saloon and carried by the wind dug deeper into him, a gnawing sense of urgency thrumming like a war drum. Tonight felt different, though. Tonight he could almost hear the bandits' laughter in the wind, a cruel echo that seemed to mock his every breath. As he surveyed the darkness beyond his property line, he clenched his fists, resolve hardening within him. No more. They would not take what was his. He slipped back into the barn, a sanctuary filled with the familiar scent of hay and aged wood. Moving with purpose, Jack retrieved the old rifle, a family heirloom that had seen its share of battles. The weight of it against his shoulder was a comfort, and he adjusted the strap, feeling the cool metal beneath his fingers. His father had taught him a man must be prepared to defend his home, to face darkness head-on. The sound of hooves reverberated in the distance, sharp and urgent, punctuated by the shouts of men laden with arrogance and bravado. Jack's heart thudded in rhythm with the galloping horses. 3 figures broke through the shadows, their silhouettes stark against the moonlit backdrop, exuding confidence that only comes from reckless disregard. One bandit jeered, dismounting with a swagger that filled the night air with prideful disdain. "Ain't nobody here." Jack's blood boiled as he listened, the fiery determination in him igniting like a match in a dark room. They thought they could charge in, guns blazing, and swipe the life he'd built with his sweat and blood. But they didn't know him. They didn't know what it was like to fight for something you loved. He crouched low, the shadows wrapping around him like a cloak as he moved toward the barn doors. Jack watched as the bandits began to rummage through his belongings, tossing aside tools and sacks of grain like they were worthless. The thought of their filthy hands on his things pushed Jack past the edge of patience. "Time to show them," he muttered, steadying himself. He took a deep breath, focusing on the cool night air filling his lungs. He would not be a victim. "Hey, you there!" shouted the first bandit, practically daring Jack to show himself. He turned to his companions, laughter spilling from him like alcohol poured recklessly into a glass, full and overflowing. But Jack wasn't afraid of bravado. He stepped into the dim light, rifle aimed steadily, a storm brewing in his chest. "You need to leave now," he said, every word laced with authority. All laughter died instantly, replaced by silence thick enough to cut. The bandits froze, eyes widening as they realized that their prey had teeth. Jack's silhouette cut a stark figure against the moonlight, a guardian ready to defend his territory. The second bandit scoffed, bravado crumbling into uncertainty. Jack didn't hesitate. He squeezed the trigger, the shot ringing out like a thunderclap on a clear day. The lead bandit crumpled to the ground, disbelief etched across his features as the life drained from his eyes. The chaos erupted instantly. The two remaining bandits turned to flee, but Jack was ready. He called out, his voice a low growl. The second bandit, fumbling for his weapon, barely managed to draw it before Jack fired again. Another shot rang out, the impact sending the bandit staggering back, crashing into the earth. Only one bandit was left, now panicking, his bravado thoroughly crushed. Jack stepped forward, the rifle still aimed, pulse racing with adrenaline. He demanded, his voice steady, calm as the unfolding dawn. The last bandit turned to run, scrambling for his horse, but Jack pursued, the predator driven by instinct, fueled by a rage that surged from deep within. He had the advantage now. The element of surprise had shifted in his favor. With one final shot, he aimed true, reminding himself that this was survival. The bandit fell, the weight of what Jack had just done settling on his shoulders. He stood in the aftermath, the silence settling around him like a heavy blanket, the remains of the bandits littering his land, a stark reminder of the darkness that had threatened his world. For a moment, Jack felt exhilarated, but that rush quickly faded, replaced by a deep, unsettling weight. He had taken lives. He had fought back, yes, but at what cost? As the moonlight turned into the soft hues of dawn, he felt a chill run down his spine, creeping in past the rush of adrenaline. Jack lowered his rifle, taking a breath filled with the smells of the earth, the damp soil and dried hay surrounding him. He had defended what was his family's legacy, his home. But the dread lingered. Would there be more to come? The shadows that lingered on the edges of the ranch were like specters, haunting him with the knowledge that they might return. In the following days, Jack worked tirelessly mending fences, clearing the remains of the encounter. The spring sun warmed the earth, pushing life into the ground, but he felt a new urgency. He needed to fortify his home to prepare for whatever would come next. He reached out to his neighbors, the farmers who lived along the ridge, each rising at dawn to battle the elements and make a living off the land. They all felt the threat. "Listen," Jack said one evening around the flickering warmth of a bonfire, "we need to watch each other's backs." His voice rang out resolute. One by one, heads nodded in agreement. They shared their stories, the battles fought and lost, igniting the fire of determination in each heart that night. They pooled resources, exchanged skills, built barriers strong enough to withstand both wind and the weight of fear. As the days turned to weeks, Jack felt the shadows lessen. He was no longer just a farmer. He'd become a sentinel, a guardian of the land and the people he loved. The camaraderie built among the neighbors wrapped around him like a protective cloak. They were united now, standing together as a force against the darkness that sought to tear them apart. But as summer wore on, that darkness returned. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Jack stood at the edge of his property, feeling the weight of something looming on the horizon. He spotted silhouettes cutting through the dusk, a group of riders, charging toward them with an unmistakable purpose. They were back, driven by the rage of defeat, hungrier now, like wolves circling their prey. "They're here," he whispered, adrenaline flooding his veins like fire. He hurriedly rallied the others, a sense of urgency in his voice. With quick, decisive movements, they took their positions, the weight of resolve settling over them like a strong wind. Jack's heart pounded as he felt the energy of his neighbors' determination. This was it, a fight for survival, but also a fight for their identity, their lives, etched into the very earth they farmed. As the bandits moved closer, it became clear they had come with more than just malice. They were armed to the teeth, eyes blazing with anger. Jack could feel the fear creeping back into the hearts of the farmers, but not for long. This time, they stood together, a wall of humanity against the approaching storm. Jack commanded, his voice cutting through the rising panic. He took a deep breath, focusing on the voices of his friends beside him, each breathing in solidarity, hearts beating as one. When the bandits closed in, a cacophony erupted, the sound of angry shouts and gunfire, echoing through the night like thunder. Jack felt the rush, the exhilaration blending with fear as they fought side by side, each shot fired fueled by their shared resolve. They were not just defending their land, they were fighting for each other, for a future untainted by fear. Amidst the chaos, Jack spotted one of the bandits headed straight for him, intent on wreaking havoc. But instead of fear, a fierce determination surged within Jack. He had faced the darkness once before. Now, he wouldn't just survive, he would thrive. With sharp focus, he fired, the shot ringing clear as it struck true. The bandit fell, and in that moment, Jack felt a surge of pride, of vindication for what they were doing. Each life taken now felt less like a burden and more like a necessity to protect everything he held dear. The skirmish raged on, but Jack could sense the tide turning. The bandits, once brimming with bravado, began to falter, their confidence waning against the determined farmers who fought for each breath, each heartbeat. With every fallen bandit, the fear receded, replaced by a primal roar of resilience that filled the air, something almost intoxicating. Jack shouted, the fire of battle igniting within him once more, pouring energy into each command. As the night wore on and dawn broke, they emerged victorious. The bandits scattered, their spirit broken like fragile glass, unable to withstand the unyielding courage of the community they had underestimated. Jack stood among the remnants of the battle, a sense of exhaustion washing over him, but also relief. They had defended their home, their lives, and in the process, fortified something much deeper: their bond, their resolve to protect each other. As the sun rose, a new light glimmered across the fields. Jack looked around, his neighbors gathering, weary yet unbroken, pride swelling in their hearts. They had fought the dark and emerged into the light together, stronger than before. He breathed in the fresh morning air, feeling something shift deep within. The shadows had tried to encroach upon their lives, but they had held firm, defiantly facing the storm. That day, the resolve planted in each heart sang out louder than ever, promise of resilience, of unity. Jack realized that the fight would continue. The shadows might return. But now, he was no longer just a farmer waiting in the shadows. He was a beacon of hope, a guardian of the land, ready to face whatever awaited him on the horizon. He had stood firm when the bandits charged, and he would always be ready, even in the darkest of nights. The moon hung low, casting a pallid glow across the land, an eerie silence settling around the Hargrove ranch. As Jack Hargrove leaned against the wooden railing of his porch, he squinted into the darkness, trying to see what his gut was telling him was there. He felt the air thrum with unease, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the stillness of the night. Just a week ago, the townsfolk had been abuzz with the news bandits were on the loose, striking fear into the hearts of every farmer. Jack had listened to each whispered tale of theft and violence, feeling the gnawing worry burrow deeper in his mind. He had heard how the McKinleys lost their cattle, how those men with no respect for the lives of others rolled through, painting ruin wherever they went. This nightmare felt like it was inching closer every night, and tonight he sensed it would reach his doorstep. As the shadows danced in the moonlight, he slipped back into the house, moving through the familiar creaks and groans that echoed through the wooden structure. A slight rustling from the barn caught his attention, and he felt a sudden chill slide down his spine. He knew he had to prepare. He wouldn't be caught off guard. Jack turned the lantern low, its flickering light barely illuminating his path as he entered the barn. There it was, the old rifle. The weight of it in his hands felt both reassuring and ominous, a piece of history that connected him to centuries of farmers before him who had stared down adversities with unyielding resolve. He'd read the stories, heard the legends of brave men who protected their homes when the world dared to take them away. Moments later, he stood by the barn door, gazing out into the surrounding fields. The temperature dropped suddenly, a conspiratorial chill that wrapped around him. Then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of horse hooves, echoing in the silence like the tremors before an earthquake. His heart raced faster as the clinking of metal and the low murmur of voices filled the air. They were near and they were brash. Jack took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. A gruff voice shouted nearby. Too close, then laughter erupted, loud and mocking, shattering the stillness of the night. The shadows became animated shapes, figures blurring into the darkness, moving with a confidence that bordered on foolishness. Bandits. They had come to rob him. Look at this dump. Another voice jeered, their arrogance permeating the night air. Jack's blood boiled at their mockery, clenching the rifle tighter. They saw him as nothing but an easy target, a stepping stone on their path of destruction. He peered through the slats of the barn, watching as the first bandit dismounted, swaggering toward the farmhouse without a care in the world. This was it, Jack thought. The moment they would regret underestimating him. He gritted his teeth. He had always been a farmer, always adhered to hard work and quiet dignity. But he understood now that sometimes when the storm hits, when the encroaching darkness tries to swallow you whole, you must become something else entirely. As the lead bandit kicked open the farmhouse door, Jack felt a fire ignite within him, a primal instinct to protect what was his. With a fierce focus, he stepped from the shadows, rifle lifted high. He barked, his voice echoing across the yard, strong and unyielding. The bandits froze, surprise etching their faces as they took in Jack's figure against the night sky. The mockery faded, replaced by a sudden hush that washed over them like a cold wave. The lead bandit spat, fumbling for his weapon, eyes widening in disbelief. Without hesitation, Jack squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, shattering the night like a lightning strike. The lead bandit crumpled to the ground, life extinguished. A hard gasp escaped Jack's lips, mingling with the smoke lingering in the air. Panic erupted. Shouted one of the remaining bandits, scrambling to mount his horse as Jack's heart pounded like a war drum. The thrill of battle coursed through him, propelling him forward. Jack fired again and watched as another bandit fell, spinning through the air in a macabre dance before hitting the ground. Fury overcame the last bandit who wheeled around, desperation eclipsing his bravado. Jack could see it, the wild eyes that revealed the depths of fear and behind it pure survival instinct. But Jack was a hunter and he was ready. He shouted, adrenaline thrumming through his veins. The bandit turned to flee, galloping into the night as Jack fired one last time, sending a parting shot that only echoed in the air, a promise that the land would never be taken from him. Breathless, heart racing, Jack stood among the aftereffects of chaos as a profound silence fell over the ranch. He felt the heat of victory mingled with the cold grip of dread. This wasn't just about protecting a parcel of land. Lives had been lost, and the weight of that hit him hard. The very air felt heavier now, charged with both triumph and tragedy. As dawn crept upon the horizon, the world awoke to the stillness left in the wake of violence. Jack walked among the remnants of his battle, surveying the body of the bandit sprawled beneath the lightning sky. A bitter taste lodged itself in his throat. He had defended his home, but the cost was steep. In the hours that followed, Jack tended to the farm, every task dragging at his soul. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the bloodstains smeared on the dirt, an indelible mark that would haunt him for days to come. He worked harder now, pushing himself with a determination he hadn't known he possessed. Each movement was a reminder of how quickly life could turn, how precious the time was. That afternoon, as he paused to catch his breath, a shadow fell over him, pulling him from his thoughts. Jack turned to find a figure standing at the edge of the fields. It was Sarah, a neighbor from down the road. Her expression was a grim mask of worry. Her eyes flickered over the remnants of the skirmish. They're saying the bandits are rallying and they're coming back. Jack felt a knot tighten in his stomach, a dreadful realization that washed over him. He was just one man, fighting against a tide of violence that threatened to engulf him. I can't let them take what's mine, Sarah. I won't, he replied, voice firm but cracks of doubt seeping in. They'll come in numbers, she warned him, stepping closer, her hand resting gently on his arm. You need to gather the others. Her concern set in motion a fierce urgency within him. Jack nodded, the decision made. He would not face this alone. They would unite, standing strong against the darkness looming just beyond the horizon. That evening, he gathered the farmers in the town square, faces he had known for years, carved with the stories of hard work and resilience. They all listened intently as Jack recounted the events of that fateful night. We have to band together, Jack urged, words echoing under the twilight sky. We cannot let fear tear us apart. He watched their faces, seeing fear transformed into determination, a flicker of energy igniting in each of them. They had fought hard for their land, their families, and tonight they would prepare for war. As they strategized and borrowed weapons, a sense of unification enveloped them. They shared stories of battles fought and plans for the future, voices rising like the lapping waves of an approaching storm. Jack rallied them with every ounce of conviction. This was not just their land. It was their home, and they would protect it at all costs. Days turned into a whirlwind of preparation as they fortified their defenses, setting traps and barriers against the inevitable assault. With each passing hour, as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness crept in, the tension gripped Jack. He could feel it in the air, almost taste the electric anticipation. Then, one fateful night, as the moon hung full and bright, he heard it, the thunder of hooves, a sound that sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. The bandits had returned, and this time they were not alone. Jack's heart sank as he counted their numbers, a surge of dread and fierce determination crashing against each other. He called out, the words bursting from his lips, echoing against the night sky as the farmers lined up, weapons drawn. Jack stood at the forefront, pulse racing. As the bandits charged, shouting and brandishing weapons, the air vibrated with raw energy. Jack's heart thundered in rhythm with the sounds of chaos, fear trying to claw its way in but pushed down by a tidal wave of resolve. This was their moment. Jack shouted, firing his rifle, the shot ringing clear, calling to the others to join him in the fight. The night erupted into a frenzy, shouts mingling with the discharge of weapons and the thundering hooves of horses. Jack fought like a wolf cornered, each movement instinctual, each breath filled with purpose. Yet as the battle raged on, he couldn't shake the feeling that they might be outnumbered, overwhelmed by the relentless tide of bandits. With every gunshot, every desperate cry, the world around him blurred, the chaos consuming everything until he was solely focused on survival, the primal instinct to fight wrapping around him like a cloak. Suddenly, in the middle of the fray, he locked eyes with the lead bandit. Hatred burned in the man's stare, a shared connection in the chaos that cut through the din of battle. Jack's breath quickened, heart hammering against his chest. This was the face of the enemy, the face of the danger that had come to change everything. And as their eyes met, something shifted in the air. The bandit charged, and in that moment, Jack knew that this was the moment that would define him. The stakes had never been higher. The dance of life and death writhed around them. Jack raised his rifle, but before he could pull the trigger, the bandit lunged, and everything went black. The darkness enveloped him like a blanket, disorienting and heavy. Where was he? What had happened? As Jack slowly regained his senses, he felt the ground beneath him, rough and unforgiving, the sound of chaos reverberating in the background. But another sense overwhelmed him, a deep, chilling awareness that this was merely the beginning. He forced his eyes open to flares of pain, trying to focus on the shadows looming overhead. He was not alone. The bandits were here, fierce figures drawing close, their intentions dark and clear. In that moment, with the overwhelming certainty that danger had infiltrated his deepest fears, Jack's fight had only just begun. The night was far from over and the shadows were waiting.